So again, I know there's lots of different variables with music and what folks love to hear in the morning, but I thought it was rather fitting for myself anyway, to get motivated on this kind of dark and rainy day with a little Johnny Nash. So hopefully, Murray, next time I'll try to find something that you might like a little bit more.
Randy Travis.
Allie, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go ahead and record this session that folks can go ahead and view it if they're unable to make it.
I started recording.
So again, welcome. Or Allie, are you able to record?
I actually already started.
Sorry. But welcome. Happy you're here with us this morning, hopefully with some coffee at hand as we talk about screening and really the importance of that enrollment process. And we really, invite you to ask a lot of questions today, and we want you to lean into the conversation. Our goal with these in the morning, I know that they're early for folks, but we hope that, you'll be able to kind of walk away with some additional resources and maybe a way of thinking about different elements of effective practice for mentoring. And there again, and maybe it's an introduction for you, and then you want to maybe learn a little bit more. So definitely reach out to us. We're going to be offering a full elements of effective practice for folks coming up in May. So if this is something that you're maybe just getting started, or you're looking to maybe transition from an in-person model to a hybrid model or things like that, and you want to go through a full EEP, let me know and we can get you signed up for that. So again, we hope you stick around and enjoy your coffee. And if you're having your bagel, I believe you said you're having some breakfast, that's great. And then, jump in and ask a lot of questions. So a roadmap for today, if you will, we're going to be doing some quick introductions, and that comes with getting to know you a little bit better. We're going to introduce Mentor Minnesota, and then introduce our special guest, Corinne Castro, who's here from Big Brothers Big Sisters, who we're super excited to have join in the conversation. And then we're going to talk about screening practices. We're actually going to do it a flip-flop. For those of you that have been at Bagels and Best Practices before, usually I kind of go into a high-level highlight of the practice, and then we invite our special guests, but we're going to do it the other way around. Corinne's going to jump in first. So we're going to talk about the program side of things with the process, the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, kind of a high level overview, some challenges and some wins for them. And then I'm going to dive into some of the important pieces that I pulled from the screening process. And then from there, we created a screening resource packet for all of you to walk away with this. And so hopefully that will be helpful to you as you bring it back to your teams and stakeholders if they're curious about this process. And then at the end, a little bit of time for Q&A. So getting to know all of you, I believe I know everyone on the call, but maybe Corinne does not as a guest. So if in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing your name, your pronoun, your agency, and then what is one thing that you're maybe curious about or concerned about when it comes to screening, or maybe even just one word. What is one word that comes to mind when someone talks about screening or screening process? And as you continue to fill up the chat, hopefully, we're going to introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm going to kick it over to Allie first.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Allie Ervig.
Oh, you're muted, Allie.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
No. Oh, you can hear?
I can hear.
Oh, good.
Just Emily?
Odd.
Okay.
Go for it, Allie.
Well, I'm Allie Ervig, she, her, and I'm the marketing and development manager at Mentor Minnesota. I forgot the prompt, but I'm just excited to hear what Corinne has to say today. And I'll go back to Emily if she can hear me.
Okay, I don't know I'm not sure why I can't hear you, but we're a close-knit team. We're small but mighty, so I'm gonna think that hopefully you were able to introduce yourself. Sarah Schaefer is our executive director. She can't be with us this morning as she's traveling abroad, but she's here in spirit. I'm Emily Garai, she, her. I'm the program director here at Mentor Minnesota. I've been on the Mentor Minnesota team for a year. Before that, I worked in education, K-12, primarily with special education. So I'm happy to be here and to continue supporting young people through mentorship and supporting all the adults that provide those opportunities for young people. And along with us today is Corinne Castro. Corinne is the Director of Enrollment and Matching Big Brothers Big Sisters Twin Cities, and we're super excited that she's here to join in this conversation and to talk about, again, on their program side of things at Big Brothers Big Sisters. A little bit about Mentor Minnesota. Our mission really is to fuel the quality and quantity of developmental relationships for young people across the state and beyond. And really that means that we want to support you, all the adults that provide these opportunities for young people. So we believe in holistic youth development and that we elevate quality training opportunities, cohort learning, connecting people to each other, expanding the movement, and influencing systems through youth voice advocacy and really allowing that youth voice to be highlighted in everything that we do. Again, sort of our work in a snapshot, we provide trainings on best practices. We offer evidence-based resources such as the elements of effective practice that we're going to be talking about today a little bit. We provide one-on-one consulting, that's coaching through technical assistance. So because we are a technical assistance provider through the NMRC or the National Mentoring Resource Center, programs can actually come to us and receive technical assistance at no cost to their program. We also offer workshops and those cohort experiences where people can learn and lead together. So again, as I mentioned, our big foundational piece that we ground all of our trainings and really everything that we do is off of the elements for effective practice. And within that, there's 6 elements. And today we're talking about screening. And again, these are some benchmarks and enhancements that programs are, can utilize as a guide for them when they are creating and supporting their mentoring program. So kind of to ground us in the conversation today, I'm going to play a short video. And because Corinne is here from Big Brothers Big Sisters, this is a video from them. And it's a quick video. It's only a couple of minutes. And it just talks about really the importance that the process is so thorough and what that means on, wanting to really be intentional in this work of screening.
I think the biggest impact that you can make in someone's life usually is through relationships, and that's what Big Brothers Big Sisters is all about, is building those strong relationships with youth in the community.
Big Brothers Big Sisters really does challenge you as a big to be clear about why you're there and what your intentions are. You have to figure out with your head that I really want to be here, because there's a challenge, and Big Brothers Big Sisters impresses upon you how important it is your contribution to this kid's life.
But I think that's super important on the process, that it is so thorough. So for example, I met with a volunteer coordinator and learned all about the program. That way I was better educated on really what Big Brothers Big Sisters does. And then a representative from Big Brothers Big Sisters called me and connected with me on just learning a lot about me as far as my experiences growing up and what I hope to do with the little in the community. That way they can best place me with the little who I can be most impactful on.
What I love most about the program is the personal growth that empowers me to hang in long term, and that I can see this kid's evolution. I can see this kid, 6 months out from this kid 6 months ago. That is just awesome to see this kid develop. I just want this kid to have the experience a kid could have and should have. Your circumstances are not your life, they are your circumstances today. Hang out, tomorrow they will change. But being true to yourself, I think, is much more empowering than anything else.
So the importance of being thorough. So screening, that's really done with intention, thoughtfulness, and guidance. And it's how critical that really is. And so to join us in this conversation about the screening process through the lens of programming is Corinne Castro, the Director of Enrollment and Matching at Big Brothers Big Sisters Twin Cities. So we're excited to welcome Corinne to this conversation. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, Corinne, and let you introduce yourself. And you should be able to share your screen too if you'd like.
Great. Good morning. On this gloomy day, gloomy days are my favorite, so it actually puts me in a really good mood. So I'm glad to be here. My name is Corinne Castro. I use she, her pronouns. I've been with Big Brothers Big Sisters for just over 10 years. So Murray, depending on when you were with us, I might have been there. Invitation, doors always open. Do you want to come back?
It was 30 years ago in New York City area.
All right, so a little before me. I've worked in a variety of different roles, but the last 5 or 6 years, I've been the director of our enrollment and matching team for a community-based program. And because our community-based program is one-on-one, where the volunteers go to the home, they pick the youth up and take them out to do things in the community together. Because there is no direct supervision of this match relationship, our screening process is incredibly important. And so, our process has evolved a lot over the years, and it is constantly evolving as best practices come up, as we attend events like this and other things and learn and kind of pick things that other agencies are doing. Our process is always a balance between using the critical eye when you're looking for red flags or concerns or challenges, but also looking for potential in the volunteers, and it's also extremely detailed. And so I have just a few slides I'm going to show. It kind of helps just my mind stay focused. And we won't have enough time to go through like our entire process because it is super detailed, and I saw some notes here on the side, so I'd love to make sure we have enough time for questions, and hopefully I can answer at least or engage in some conversation. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, so this, I think for our team is just so important that we are always understanding and grounded in the purpose of our screening and enrollment process. And it's kind of fourfold. There, one, it's we want to learn about the volunteer and who they are, why they're coming to us, what's motivating them. It's also, though, an opportunity for us to coach them about us. And we do a lot of coaching throughout the interview and enrollment process of the volunteers, because we want them to really understand what are our expectations of them as a volunteer in our program. It's also, purpose of our screening is to assess their ability to form a positive and healthy relationship with the child. Do we feel confident at the end of the screening process that they're going to be a strong mentor for a youth in our program? And then, of course, the big one is we're screening and for assessing for child safety and concerns. We want this person to be a emotionally healthy and safe person and physically healthy and safe person. And so by the time they complete our entire screening and enrollment process, we kind of feel like we're putting a stamp of approval, and parents and guardians are trusting us with this. And so we take it very seriously to do our due diligence, that we're doing every piece as thorough as possible until they're accepted. I would say that over the years, there's a lot of learnings, kind of missteps that we've made and learnings and growing. But kind of at the top of my head, some 4 key learnings that I had come up with was, 1, clear communication about expectations. We used to really be light on that because we were afraid if we laid it out very clearly, like what we need from you, that volunteers would not want to come to us, or they would be scared away. And so oftentimes we would like lightly say it. We would even be afraid to say it's a 1-year commitment, or this is how, But then we ended up finding out that it just ended up causing more issues down the road, because volunteers would feel like they weren't clearly explained what the process it was. You know, we weren't always giving clear timelines, because again, our screening process can take a month or longer, and we were afraid to say how long it might take, because then they might decide not to volunteer with us. Well, we learned it's better to be very clear upfront about the expectations. And also that it's okay if a volunteer self-selects out, because that is not what they were looking for. And we'd much rather them self-select and make an informed decision upfront than get into the program and match with a kid and then decide it's actually not what they were looking for, and then close the match. And now, you know, we have potential harm on one of our youth. So communication, clear communication and ongoing communication. You know, we used to tell volunteers everything in the beginning about what to expect, and realize they, you know, maybe retain 2% of what we say. So we have identified like key pieces that are important for them around expectations, and we just repeat that throughout the entire enrollment process. So we're communicating beginning, in the middle, in the end. It never stops. And even once they're accepted and waiting, we continue to communicate about our expectations with them. Culture of consults. This has become huge for our team. It's a daily practice. You know, it's a time for our staff to go to one another to get second opinions. It's a way to seek different perspectives, to develop, you know, kind of for professional development, and also to check on your own personal biases when you're assessing volunteers, which has been really important in our work. Listening to your intuition. Sometimes you just get that ick feeling or unsettled feeling, and everything else might line up properly. But if you have that feeling and you've done your consults and you're checking your biases, you're going around, you still have that feeling, listen to that. So we encourage that. And then also, it's okay to say no. You know, we've learned the importance of really leaning into who we are as an organization and what our values are and what our boundaries are, and giving our staff the tools and the confidence to make the best and their best and professional decisions on a volunteer. You know, we can be kind, but, you know, it's not an automatic privilege or right for a volunteer to volunteer just because they want to with us, because we're really a unique, and I'm sure all places think like we're unique, you know, but we say we're not a fit for everybody. And so we try to really set that up in the beginning as well. So those are kind of some of our just key learnings that we've had and as we've been moving along in practice. And tied to the key learning around communication, we started this not too long ago. It's our volunteer mentor position description. And this they get right up front after they apply. This talks to them about program requirements. What is it to be a volunteer? What is the volunteer role, right? It's not to be a parent or a savior or counselor. It's to be a friend. We kind of say like a guide by the side. It's to have an open mind, have patience, be consistent, you know, and those sort of things. And, you know, and educating yourself about your own culture, own privileges and values and biases. So we give this as a prep also before the interview, so they kind of know some of the things we're going to be talking about with them in the interview. And we also send them this. So we created this because we realized we used to just tell them our entire process and they would nod and say they understand, and it's just too much information. So we wanted it to be a visual so we can walk them through as they go along. So they kind of know here, like this is the enrollment. Actually, this entire thing is the enrollment process for them. And so we want them to be clear every step, what it all includes. We also want them to know there's certain parts that we are responsible for, but there's also certain parts that they are responsible for. And that is even part of the screening. If they don't complete the things that they're responsible for, we may not accept them because they're not following through with us. And so it's kind of a shared responsibility between the volunteer and the staff person of moving them kind of along our enrollment process. And of course, our main components. So we do reference checks. We do them from a variety of spheres of their life. We want to get to hear from people in their personal life, their family, professional references, any previous youth experience that they've had in the last 5 years. We would ask for a release of information for them. We want to talk to roommates. And so, and we have found that, references have been a really key part for us in our screening process. We make it very clear to the references it's absolutely confidential. So we will never, even if the reference tells us something that's in complete opposite of what a volunteer tells us, we would never tell a volunteer, this person said this and you said that, so that they have really been instrumental for us in making some of our decisions. And you'd be amazed at how honest references can be about their folks. And so we do references, we do 3-layered background checks. And we just started fingerprinting, which is a newer process for us. It's a bit cumbersome at this point, and we're hoping to fine tune and make it as streamlined as possible, but that is a newer part initially. And, and also I want to say some of our screening processes, they come from our national requirements. Some come from our agencies that of best practices we've learned, and some are also come from grants. And so fingerprinting is something that is part of a grant that we're receiving from nationals, from our Office of Juvenile Justice. So, so that has been included into our enrollment process at this point. We also do a public domain search on all of our volunteers. We want to know what their online presence is like. And it doesn't happen often, but also there have been volunteers that because of that, we have had to deny. And sometimes it's not worth, it's not so strong enough where we would deny them, but we would just say, because we let them know up front we'll be doing this, we might say, hey, you might want to consider making your account private because kids are very curious. And they will probably be looking you up, and do you want them to see this kind of part of yourself represented? So sometimes it's just a coaching moment, or sometimes it might be a moment where we actually do not accept someone. And then our interview is our big piece. It can be anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. It's face-to-face. We used to always be in person, but since COVID, we switched to virtual. We will be going back to in person soon, but that in-person, that visual is really important because as part of our assessments, we're documenting that interaction, body language, facial expressions, so we want to get the whole picture of who this person is, and you can't do that just from the phone. And so, the interview can be very personal. We want to know what's driving them and motivating them to want to come to us. What are their interests? What does their social network and peer relationships look like? That's really important that they have healthy adult relationships in their lives. Because if all of their relationships are with youth, that would be a red flag for us. What do they have any physical or mental health challenges? What was their family dynamic like growing up? What is their experience with youth? We also talk about their match, we call them match preferences. Part of it is to gauge it's to help us identify if they were accepted, who they would match well with. So we do ask them, what age are you open to being matched with? Are you open to race or ethnicity, family dynamics, maybe past trauma that a youth or family has experienced? Are you open to working with a family or youth that identifies as LGBTQ+? But our match preference is not just solely to, we kind of say it's not a Build-A-Bear system here where you are listing off all of your preferences and then we're going to produce this perfect child for you. It's also part of our screening process, because if a volunteer has very specific and narrow preferences, that is also a big concern for us. It could be a child safety concern. right? Or it could also, or could just be a concern around expectations and not really understanding their role and what the program is as a volunteer. So sometimes those conversations open the door to have coaching about, you know, judgment, biases, you know, walking into homes. And so, and we use those coaching conversations as a big part of our screening process. You know, recently, well, last year, like something we used to ask all volunteers if they were open to working with a family or youth identified as LGBTQ+. And before, they sometimes, if they said no, we would just say, okay, and mark it. But at this point, we won't accept a volunteer anymore if they say no. You know, if they say no because it's just, they don't have enough experience and they're just not sure if they could be a best support, but they're open to learning, then we will still accept them. But if it's just a homophobia or just like a bias, like I just don't want to, then we really leaned into like, that's doesn't align with our values as an agency. And also with our process, we know most of the youth that we serve don't come out until after they're already matched in a program. And whether a volunteer is overtly saying, I don't like gay people, we think about all those like micro messages that the little is absorbing and hearing from their mentor. And so that is like an example of how we've adjusted in our processes and tried to make it more aligned and like really standing more true in who we are. And so we do every once in a while, we take our interviews and our questions and we come back to, why are we asking this question? What is the purpose behind it? And does it align with what our values are? And, you know, and I think that is a challenge. I'll just stop screening here. It is a challenge for us too, because in our screening, because it's easy to learn about interests and motivation and family history. The hard stuff is the kind of soft things, which we feel are the most important key pieces to being a great mentor, you know, and those things are like, do you have a growth mindset? Do you see yourself as both a teacher and a learner, and that you have something to learn from the child just as much as they do from you, and that you are not here to save anybody? Does a volunteer have a youth and like a more relationship focus and youth focus versus self focus? Does a volunteer have a level of emotional intelligence that's required? Do they display levels of empathy and self-awareness? Are they good listeners? And do they have a level of cultural humility, ability to refrain from judgment, and like a desire to grow in that? So, and those can be really hard things to assess in an interview. And so what we've really, I would say in the last year, have honed in on is inserting a lot of scenarios that we pull from real life examples. When we see matches close, you know, we've had matches close because volunteers have felt, well, this child doesn't need me enough. And so it's like, wow, okay, so then we've created scenarios on the front end to kind of gauge, like, and the scenarios are both to coach them through, but also to understand what their thinking would be. And so those are hard, and we're still, I think, trying to fine tune and figure out the best ways to assess for that information. And would love to know if like anyone else has ideas or things that they're doing around that. And so all of that is packaged into what we would say make the final determination. If we believe that a volunteer, if we feel confident, then we will send them to a self-led 1.5-hour pre-match training, which is a really great way for them to kind of hear all the information again on their own and to really like learn again, what does it mean to be a mentor? It even talks about healthy closure, you know, and things like that. And also we really emphasize, what does it mean to form a relationship with a parent and guardian? And then after that, we make the final decision. We decide whether we want to accept them or deny them. And sometimes our denials are permanent denials. We just don't think our program is the right fit for them. And we don't feel like it ever will necessarily be. And sometimes it's just a temporary denial. It's maybe more situational, like you are going to be moving in 6 months and you're not sure where you're going to be moving. We're not going to accept you until you know where you're going to move, because that's going to affect how we match them. And so, or significant life changes are coming up. And so those are a lot of things. And we always say, our belief is a volunteer is always being evaluated and screened. Even after they've been accepted, we're still observing interactions and communications. Again, it doesn't happen often, but there have been situations where we've had to deny a volunteer after they were accepted for something. And so we kind of say, like, we never, it's just pivotal for every point that like this part of the process is continuing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's our kind of main overall process. And I would love to, I see Emily said critical aspect is that it lasts for the intended duration of the original commitment. And yeah, and we ask for a 1-year commitment, and that's really big. And what we've also, in alignment with setting expectations, we have started to say it's a 1-year commitment from when your match begins. And so it doesn't start from when your interview starts, because sometimes for like our big sisters, for example, who live maybe in southern suburbs, we don't have a lot of kids, they might be waiting 6 or 7 months. And so they need to understand. So for you, the commitment might be more 2 years. And then that's really eye-opening for people. And so, yes, and being able to meet the commitment. But also another thing too, we've really realized is even for match closures, even if a volunteer isn't able to meet the full 1-year commitment, what's so key is that healthy closure, and that they're able to have a conversation with the child, so the child knows it's not their fault, it's not about them. And it's like a learning lesson, like relationships end, right? There's like an ending, but it can be done in a positive way that feels good. And so we also assess for a volunteer in the beginning of like, how would you approach this situation? And so there's a lot of components, and it's not easy. And that's, again, why we really talk about consults, because having to think through all this, our team is an extremely diverse team in all ways, and they all come with their own perspectives and their own lived experiences. And so that's why we really try to normalize like looking at consults and looking at their own biases, because they're all bringing it into the interviews as well when they're screening. So it's important that they're checking their own before they're checking a volunteer's, right? And and we say you may not want to have coffee with this volunteer, right? They may not be someone you want to be their friend, but could they be a strong and awesome person for a child? What do they bring to the table? And so we do a lot of focus as well on like a strength-based piece as well, to grow. And like I said, at the end of the day, sometimes intuition just wins out, and it just might not feel like it's the right person. So I'll pause there.
No, it's so great, Corinne. And I will say too, I just wanted to mention when I introduced you, I didn't mention too that, I mean, you were also an award winner for the Margaret Slack Award, which just is a big deal. And I'm just so excited that you're here and that you are really a champion in this. And again, that Margaret Slack Award is given to people that have an outstanding level of professionalism and quality of service. So again, and you've been with Big Brothers, Big Sisters for 10 years. So again, appreciate your wisdom on this. And to appreciate your transparency, and that, you're talking about different ways that you've tailored and maybe updated or tweaked your enrollment or screening processes, as the program continues to grow. And so appreciate all of that. When you're talking, and when you're talking about this intuition and kind of going back to that, included in that screening packet that we created is information on how to get a hold of the SAFE book that's really talks a lot about that intuition for program leaders, that, if you're getting this feeling of something isn't right, leaning into that, and that's okay to do. And that you do have the ability to say no. But again, I won't get into that, but I will share all that information because it does the SAFE book from Becky Cooper just does a nice job of talking about that intuition. But I know folks might have a few questions, so I want to leave some airspace for anyone that wants to ask some questions.
Mary Sue, you had a hand up momentarily.
Sorry, guys. I meant to give you an applause for your award. I think what you guys are doing is
Give me a
extremely,
question too.
I don't have one. I just think what you're doing is extremely thorough, well thought out, includes, your emotional intelligence, all of your research, and then your intuition. I think it's really, really well thought out. I do kind of have a question. To be really honest, I forget to tell families to look into Big Brothers Big Sisters. We're in suburban Ramsey County. All my life that I've worked here, there's been really, really, really long waiting lists. And so I just never, ever even get their hopes up. So I don't know, has that changed at all, Corinne? I don't know.
Depends. So I know it's kind of, this is our Achilles heel. So
Yeah.
we typically always, our meetings are always going to be men. Because typically our breakdown is we have 75% of our youth are little brothers, and typically they all want big brothers.
Yeah.
Which opens up a whole other thing, right? Of like how the dichotomy of our name, because that's been another big thing in our screening process too, is like, those who don't identify as a she or a he are like, is there a place for me in your organization? How do I fit in? And we're like, yes, there is, right? But unfortunately, I guess, there's so many benefits of being part of a larger or national level organization, and also some of the challenges where we're kind of stuck with this name, but it doesn't necessarily for us fit with our community anymore and what we're seeing. And so, but typically, let's say most of our we have young boys self-identified as males. They want big brothers because most of our families are single mothers so there's like a very apparent kind of missing point there. And so they want their child to have that male. And so it is a much longer wait for little brothers, but sometimes they're open to working with someone outside of the male gender, and then it's much faster to match them. And so we're really trying to steer away from this like gender specific matching and more to just mentoring. Like mentoring is important versus you should have a big brother, you should have a big sister. And it kind of depends on location too. And that's always something, because then like 75% of our bigs are females. So it's like the opposite that we always have that we're working with.
Thank you. I appreciate that challenge. I really do.
Yeah.
I see Jared had a question in the chat. Does the self-guided training, or what does the self-guided training include? How long is it? And is it produced by you or by a third party?
So lucky for us, we used to do our own trainings, but this is one that recently came out from nationals. So it's from our national organization. It's an hour and a half. It's self-led, and so they have like different modules, and each module is on a different topic. Like some might just be further education about the program. Some is parts about like being a mandated reporter and what that means in child safety. One talks about, is another area talks about the importance of having a relationship with the family, because sometimes our volunteers come in and all they're thinking is the kid. We're like, but actually we've learned over the years that their relationship with the family is sometimes more important than the relate, because then they have a tag team of support to really encourage and nurture the relationship. And then the parent, as they should be, are now included and have their voice at the table. It talks about youth voice and the importance of, again, a volunteer not coming in to save. Like white saviorism is a thing that's just has been coming up a lot. I would say, especially after the murder of George Floyd. It was a huge traumatic thing in the community and a lot of the families that we work with. And we're very aware that 80% of youth that we serve are youth of color. 80% of our volunteers are white bodied. And so already here's this like friction point, potential friction point, you know, and we noticed too, after big things happen, or big traumatic events happen in the community, we get waves of volunteers come in because they feel a personal call to action. You know, I think looking for something to do, a way to help. And so volunteering is a way to do it. And so in some ways it's really wonderful, but also gives our team more work in their screening process, again, to really understand this motivation of why that's driving you. Because then what we're seeing is a lot of volunteers coming because I want to save this like poor Black child, right? And we're like, no, we need to reframe this. And, you know, we understand that cultural humility and competence, everyone is on their journey and we all have more to learn and grow in that. But for our program, you have to be at a certain point in your journey already, because we unfortunately just don't have the tools and resources to start it with you. And so sometimes those can be really hard conversations to have in explaining it and understanding it. And so, yeah, it's a fun, messy, sometimes complicated process, but that's why, you know, it's so important for us to like be able to lean and really have a strong understanding of what our values are of our organization, what is the purpose of our screening, so that when we have doubts, we have that to lean back into to feel confident about our decisions. Murray, question. Does this sound familiar to you? I bet things.
Well, I just did the math. I was actually a big brother 45 years ago.
Okay,
So,
wow.
so when I left college, I was interested in it, and but back then, what you just described didn't exist. I mean, It was like you show up, okay, you want to do it. My situation was a mother really wanted somebody to help her son, who was he was really upset that his father had left, taken. I enjoyed it was wonderful. It was for 4 years, and then I started my own family and also started traveling like crazy, and it just didn't work. But I have a question for you. Do you use, there are lots of old guys like me that would like to help. One of the ways to educate, to get them to understand about Big Brothers, is through LinkedIn, because a lot of people are on LinkedIn. You use LinkedIn as a tool, and how could I help? I have I don't know, 4,000 connections on LinkedIn, and through the Sundance Family Foundation, we have lots. How can I help? And
well, Murray, I would love to connect with you offline. Can share my email, because we don't like to call them old folks. We call them our wise volunteers. We actually use it as a selling point sometimes, because most of our volunteers are young and vibrant and in their 20s, and it's wonderful. And sometimes our parents are like, I want someone really young, right? But we'll say, but also some of our wiser volunteers, they're more settled. They're less likely in 6 months to get a new job, move out of state, start a family. They have a lot of life experience and a level sometimes of like maturity and stability. So we take them all, you know, and I think every person has their own unique kind of strength and benefit. And some kids don't need that level of kind of maturity or experience, and some really, really do. So I would love to connect with you outside, and I'll put my email in here, and you know, anyone can feel free to email me with additional questions or comments or anything like that.
Yeah, and I'm in a mentoring program at the Wayzata High School, and I think I've had at least 8 mentees. It's a professional development program, and I've had females, males, all different colors, and it goes all over the map whether I'm good at it or not. But I'd love to sit with you and give you some thoughts and see how we could help. So I'm full with Sundance, my grandkids.
All right, you're setting boundaries. I will not try to recruit you personally. I will just we'll look
I will
at,
help, I will help you find volunteers.
that would be awesome. Thank you. Any other thoughts, or not even maybe questions, but any other similar challenges, folks are seeing? Mary Sue.
Sorry again.
Oh,
You guys don't do e-mentoring, do you?
no,
No.
don't.
Okay.
It is like a packaged kind of service that Big Brothers Big Sisters does. When COVID first happened, we had 24 hours to shift our entire operation to be virtual. And it wasn't really successful for us. Now, some of it could be because we weren't doing e-mentoring. We didn't have the whole infrastructure set up.
Mhm.
But we found it hard for our kids to feel
Yeah.
engaged and
Yeah.
connected. And unfortunately, a number of our matches just did not last, or didn't have the same
Mhm.
strength of relationship. But again, I think e-mentoring could be really successful, potentially, maybe if it's more of like targeted type mentoring, if it's like you're doing it to work on school stuff or academic, it's like more specific than just like relationship development.
Yeah, I was involved in an e-mentoring with St. Paul schools, St. Paul
Mhm.
Public Schools. And it was really around supporting youth to achieve academic success.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the year, we all met together in person, had lunch, then we could decide to, they could job shadow us. And so then they became kind of a career job shadow mentor. And it was a nice progression because we got to meet each other first online, then we got to meet each other in
Mhm.
person, and then it could progress. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out, I'm sure youth are so zoomed out, this
Oh.
isn't a good option anymore.
I'm zoomed out. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
I will say, so in that screening packet, I'm including some of the e-mentoring guidelines that Mentor has created. And I know like Julie Anderson that's on the call is with Best Prep, and Best Prep has had really great success in some e-mentoring platforms. But as you mentioned, I think it's, if it can be very tailored and specific to connecting, or their matches are very specific to maybe career or work pathways. It's kind of a nice way for maybe schools to kind of integrate. And I know there's been several programs that have reached out to us and they're doing some hybrid models. And so they're applying for some technical assistance in order to put all of those very, kind of intertwining elements of their mentoring program only on a virtual format. And so there's just different pieces that go into that, but I just wanted to kind of mention that a little bit too.
Thanks, Emily. Keep me informed
Yeah,
on that. I'm still
for
really
sure.
interested. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, we need connection, right? And that's no different for young people. And so I don't know that virtual mentoring will go away. I do think it's going to just maybe be like a supplement or maybe an add-on in many cases. But again, like Best Prep has done a really nice job. So I wouldn't want to deter folks from maybe wanting to look into it. But I do think that, the more young people we can reach and connect and support, the better, especially right now. So.
What we do in the mentoring program, what I've started doing is once a week by Zoom and then once a month in person.
Yeah. And I do think you're going to see, more of that. And I think it's maybe even, as Corinne mentioned, you had like 24 hours or a really short time. Yeah. And I think now when COVID happened, we didn't know what to do. And so now it's having that contingency plan too. We're kind of having maybe that always there and ready so that we can do a better job of supporting no matter what kind of model we may have to change to at any point, but at the same time being hopeful that we are getting back to more in-person connections.
And it's also allowing our matches who would have closed because someone moved, they have decided to stay because they now have this virtual option to stay connected.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even young people in rural communities that maybe don't have a Big Brothers Big Sisters in their backyard to connect to, or a Boys and Girls Club per se. So sometimes, it's allowed them to have a mentoring relationship where they might not have otherwise had. But I see. So Jared's got another question, and then I'll
Yeah.
probably, yeah, oh, go for it.
Interesting question. I would say yes and no. I think I don't, I don't have the data in front of me to see kind of like our percentage of denials. I would say though there are a number of things that we have seen that have changed since COVID. One, I think because of the Zoom fatigue, we see, like for example, after with George Floyd, there was this huge rush, but again, that's why we have to assess like what is your like real motivation and is it going to sustain? I think a lot of people had good intentions, but didn't really, they were more motivated by this initial like emotional response versus like really thinking through, right? And so like we did have quite a few maybe denials at that point, or even, and what we actually try to do is if we know we will likely not accept a volunteer, we try to have them self-select themselves out. And we do that by coaching so they can kind of come to their own conclusion that this isn't the right fit. That's kind of like the best case scenario. So I would say yes, kind of some denials based on just motivation, and some of that just didn't seem like a really great fit. I also think our team has increased our scrutiny since COVID with screening. I mean, social and racial justice has become so forefront for us. I mean, we only just had a JEDI committee start in a year ago, and we just created a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion page on our website within this last year. So it has become such an important becoming more and more important in our work that I feel like we're also just becoming more critical on who we're accepting that. So I don't know if necessarily the people coming to us are becoming worse, or it's just we're fine-tuning and becoming more critical in how we're discerning who we want to accept into our program. And we're having better tools of how to assess for that.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Great questions from everyone. Such a good conversation. I know folks might have to bounce out a little bit or jump into other commitments, but I'm happy to stay on. I was just going to share a few more things with folks again, but always appreciate and feel like a good conversation supersedes any slides or presentation like information. Yeah, I appreciate this so much.
Yeah.
I will. Oh,
I gotta leave because I got to go get my bagel. I'll be right, but I'll see you again. Bye.
Thanks, Marie.
Yeah,
Enjoy that
I have
bagel.
to go, but it was so nice to join and see everyone's faces and meet all of you. Thank you so much for being so welcoming.
Yeah, no, Corinne, we appreciate you. And again, congratulations on all that you do. I'm just happy we've been able to connect and be able to absorb some of your wisdom this morning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's